So in this video I wanted to explore a little bit about pain and its relationship to yoga practice. Now, pain is one of those things that's just kind of inevitable, really. It's just an integral part of life. When was the last time you experienced pain? I wonder perhaps whether it was just quite recently, maybe today, or maybe even just now. Pain is something that we experience, big or small, but regularly, right? It doesn't really matter how deep our practice goes, we will still always feel pain. Because there are some examples from the life of the Buddha, for example, where he quite clearly was in pain. Later on in his life, his feet, his posture, his back, neck, he needed a massage, after all the days of walking and things. So he was deeply enlightened, but still felt pain. So we can't escape it, it's just a part of our life. But what we can do is understand it more, and there are some things that our yoga practice can help us with to come to terms with and deal with pain. So pain is a signal from the body that something is up. It's telling us that perhaps there's been an injury, but sometimes it's also very difficult to work out what the pain is telling us, what it's trying to signal. The arising and the perception of pain is a very complex subject, and it involves many different things, and perhaps still not really that fully understood. Now, the perception of pain and the perception of touch are actually different. So, for example, we can touch a hot stove and we know we've touched it, and then we get this rush of pain that it's very, very hot and we burnt our finger. So there's a separation there between the sense of touch and the sense of pain, which might arise afterwards or a little bit afterwards. Sometimes it's quite a lot afterwards. There's a famous example of a runner in some Olympics somewhere who ran the entire race, finished the race, and then collapsed in acute pain. And it turns out afterwards that at some point during the race, they basically fractured the bone in their leg, but just carried on anyway, and they kind of not really recognized that, finished the race, and then of course the feeling of pain becomes overwhelming. So there's something there around the perception and the arising and the delay, about how the pain manifests in our conscious awareness. So people's perception of pain varies widely. One person might feel pain in one way, another person a very different sensation. And also in ourselves, between different days and different times of our life, our perception of pain changes. So it's a very complex situation. And as I see it, yoga can help in four main ways. First of all, if it's done right, then yoga helps us to create a safe and unthreatening environment for us to explore movement and to explore our body. Number two, yoga teaches us how to relax, how to soften the body. Number three, yoga shows us how to bring awareness, attention to what's going on, and that has lots of different knock-ons. So first of all, when we bring our awareness to the present moment, it helps us to let go of worries and thoughts and basically kind of helps us to let go of stress. So we de-stress when we come and do yoga. And then also the attention, the awareness, it encourages us to see more clearly what's going on. Things that were previously unconscious become conscious. And number four, yoga teaches us to change our relationship with sensation. Actually, it's changing our relationship with all of experience. We realize that when we want and when we crave, when we're trying to get things to go our way, this doesn't really work. We learn to let go. We learn the art of acceptance of things moment to moment. We also learn the art of non-judgment, non-criticism about how things are. We learn to be more present in things. So let's unpack all of these points one by one. But first, in order to do this, we need a little bit of theory. Right, so we've said that our perception of pain varies between different people and also different times. It's actually really quite variable. So, but why? Why is this? People originally thought that the greater the injury, the greater the pain. But it's become clear over the years that this definitely isn't the case. Now we see that our state of consciousness affects our perception of pain. In the 60s, there was this theory put forward called the gate control theory of pain. Now, this has been developed and added on over the years, but I think essentially it's very helpful to us to get a sense of the basics of this. So the theory says that in the base of the brain, in the brainstem and spinal cord, there are a series of gates. And these gates, if they're open, allow sensation to be registered by the conscious brain, which is at the top. And if the gates are closed, then the sensation's dealt with by the unconscious part of the brain, and we don't become aware of it ourselves. So very simply, one example would be as soon as you put your clothes on in the morning, then very quickly the sensation gates close and we stop becoming consciously aware of having clothes on. Although we can notice it straight away and the gates open, but actually most of the time the clothes, we're not really aware of it. Because basically, if we were aware of all of the sensations in the body, then we'd become flooded by, overwhelmed really by the amount of information, and the conscious mind's not really built for that. That's what the unconscious part of the brain is there for. The conscious mind is for becoming aware of things selectively. So they're basically like filters at the back of the brain, which allow things through or not. So it seems like the state of the gates, whether they're open or closed, is very much dependent on a complex interplay of different factors, including our physical state, but also our emotional or psychological state, and also where our attention is, or the kind of attention that we've got. So this is how we can explain how our perception of pain varies widely between different situations and different people. The interplay between these three factors: the physical state of the body, the emotional or psychological state of our mind, and also where our attention is, or how our attention is. So let's explore how point number one helps, how yoga helps. Point number one, creating a safe and unthreatening environment to explore and to move. Why is this helpful? So feeling safe or not safe, threatened or not threatened, plays a big role in our mental, emotional, psychological state. So, for example, if someone was to come and tickle you, in a safe environment, you might be happy to let that happen. You might really, really enjoy it and laugh and tumble around. But in an unsafe environment, in a threatening environment, that same tickle movement might be perceived as being more invasive, might be like a threat. It might be something that we tense up against and find very uncomfortable. Feeling safe itself is a perception, and it's something which happens unconsciously. Our threat detection system, our awareness about what's going on, is something which is happening unconsciously all the time. So in the extreme situation, like PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, that's basically where our threat response is stuck on. We feel like we're in a threatening environment all the time, and our whole body is on high alert, basically all the time. That means we become extra sensitive to sensations and to pain, and perceive sensations as painful that other people might not, because we're in this heightened state of alert, whether we've got PTSD or not. But basically, stress induces a state of high alert. If we feel stressed, then we feel threatened, we feel unsafe. In an environment which is unsafe, then all of our sensitivity goes up and we become extra sensitive to pain. So if we can be in an environment like a yoga class which makes us feel safe and unthreatened, then our pain threshold goes down, and maybe we can, what would have felt painful just feels like interesting or curious or maybe even ticklish, within our yoga class. So point number two of why yoga helps. Yoga teaches us to relax and soften the body. So when we were very young, probably, we learnt this, that when we hold tension in the body, it blocks sensation. It basically overrides or shouts louder than the sensation. Holding tension means we don't feel as much. And so some people, if they got chronic pain or things are ongoing, hold a lot of tension to try to sort of combat that. Now we come to our yoga class, and yoga is showing us how to relax. It teaches us how to soften the body. And that means that some of the sensation which we were previously blocking out starts to come up. Whether that's unpleasant or indeed pleasant, we start to notice all of sensation a little bit more when our body is more relaxed. So point number 3 of why yoga helps us to bring our attention to the present moment. Now, when we bring our awareness to the here and now, we're full of what's going on here. And hopefully in a yoga class, that is not anxious-filled, stress-filled everyday life. It's something that is kind of like kind and calm and steady. So it allows those kind of anxious and worried thoughts to just quieten down. It allows us to release stress. Now, stress happens when we've got basically an overwhelm of the system. Our resources are used up trying to cope with, worrying about this and coping with that. So stress is when the emotional or cognitive load goes right up. It uses up resources so that our tolerance of things that are uncomfortable goes down. We become less tolerant. Our fuse is shorter. So if we can let go of stress, then our fuse gets longer and our tolerance of sensation gets bigger. We're able to cope with more and we have more capacity for staying present with our experience. And then point number 4, yoga teaches us to change our relationship with a sensation, and in fact with all experience really. We come to see the sensation for what it really is, not something we're worried about or trying desperately to suppress or try to cover up. We see it for what it really is. We take away that emotional layer of resistance to it. Now, the teachings of the Buddha called this the second arrow. We have the physical sensation of pain, but then we have this added layer of stuff, baggage, which accumulates around it. I don't want this, how long has it been here, I don't deserve this, all that kind of stuff. And we start to realize the second of the Buddha's noble truths, that resistance causes suffering. So we have this sense that pain is inevitable. Pain is something which will always come up. But the resistance to it makes us suffer. When we want things to go a different way, then we suffer from that. So if we can be present with it, we can be aware of it, not to be critical, not trying to push it away, not trying to judge it. We're here with it. We actually take away that second arrow and we stop ourselves suffering from it. And secondly, we get to feel more than just the acute pain. I mean, pain has this tendency of shrinking our world. We become very it pulls us in, to it, so that everything else is excluded. And actually, I have a personal story about this myself. So a few years back, I became a Zen monk, and as part of my training, I did a walk through the country. I did it in traditional Zen monk's clothes, including some very unusual shoes, I suppose Japanese-style shoes. Now, Japanese-style shoes have a separation for the big toe and the rest of the toes, and then there's a bit of the shoe that comes down here between the toes. And as I was walking, this part here of my foot became extremely painful. Then I ended up with blisters, and then the blisters spread to pretty much my whole foot. It was very painful. Now, it started off like every step, my world shrunk. Everything became the pain. Everything was about tensing. My belly was so tense it started to hurt. My jaw was hurting. There's the tension. And my whole perception just basically concentrated on it until I realized what I was doing. And then I started to consciously relax my belly, my jaw, and I started to open my awareness a little bit. So it became not just the pain, but the pain and. There's a kind of dilution of my experience. So I could smell the hedgerows and the flowers, I could feel the breeze, all that kind of stuff started to arise back into my experience again. So it didn't really change the pain, it was still painful, but my experience became that much broader from it. And this is really what our yoga practice teaches us. If we can notice the tendencies and habits around what the pain does to us, then we can consciously try to do the opposite and soften, broaden, and see some of the subtler currents going on underneath that. So the feeling of pain is highly subjective, and how it arises into our conscious mind is complex. So if you're interested, I've got a course on how to make friends with your pain. It's a meditation course, 7-week program. We've got 7 different meditation practices to follow and some teaching around that. It's available on my website. You can go and check it out. Really all about how to change your relationship with it, like as we've been talking about, how to make friends with our pain and our sensations.